Hi, this is Jeff again, and this is a bit of a sidebar about schema design to show you how the flexible schema capabilities of MongoDB make it easy to import feeds from around the web. So the example I'll use is Twitter. Here I have the MongoDB homepage for Twitter. You can see the list of tweets, the last 20 tweets or so, and it turns out the same information is available in a feed. So if I go to api.twitter.com, so forth, and then screen name MongoDB, I get a JSON feed of the last 20 tweets. And the structure is fairly straightforward. It has a created date and ID, the text of the tweet, a nested user document that has information about the user who did the tweet, and then at the bottom there's some other things about whether it was retweeted, so forth, and the retweet count. And there's 20 of them in an array. So I'm going to write a simple Java program to take this data from the Twitter feed and throw it into a Mongo collection. So let's go over the program. So I get the screen name. I default to MongoDB for the screen name. You can also get it from the command line if you want through the first argument. Then I call a method called getTheLatestTweets, which returns a list of DB objects for the tweets. And I'll show you that method in a bit. Then I'll create a Mongo client, a DB collection for my tweets collection at course.twitter. And finally, I'll go through my tweets and insert them all into the database. So let's first look at how we got the tweet feed as a list of DB objects. So it's fairly straightforward. I have a method called getLatestTweets that takes the screen name. I construct a URL, including the screen name that's passed in as a parameter. I open the stream, and then I just pipe the input stream into a byte array output stream. It's not the most efficient way of doing it, but it's fairly straightforward. I'm not worrying about performance right now. And then I take the output stream and turn it into a string. And then the last step is where the magic happens. I take that string and call a method called json.parse. And this is part of the Java driver, and it basically will take a JSON string, which can either be a single document or a list, and return the parsed results as either a DB object or a list of DB objects. In this case, since it's an array, it will return it as a list. So I return that list, then I iterate through them one at a time and insert each one. So let's go to the shell, look at our document, look at a sample document with find1. And all my data is here, which is great, just like in the feed that we saw in the browser. But I noticed something I don't like, which is that the ID from the Twitter feed is in here as a number, but since it's not called underscore ID, the driver created an underscore ID for me with an object ID. I don't want that though, because what if I want to run this twice and not get any duplicates? Since a new object ID will be created each time, I can get duplicate IDs in my collection. So a simple thing to do is just use this ID as the underscore ID. So I wrote a method that will do that already, and it's called massage tweet ID. And it's very simple. It just gets the ID with no underscore, removes that ID, and then puts the value of the ID as underscore ID. And one other thing I noticed is that the feed does not contain the screen name for each tweet. And since I want to be able to store tweets for multiple screen names in the same collection, I want to add the screen name in here as well. So let's do that up here too. I'll say car.put screen name and get my screen name. And now let's run this. I'm going to drop my collection first. See what happens. My tweet count is 20, and if I look in the database, you'll see that there's a screen name here. The screen name is MongoDB, and my ID is now the number long that came from the feed itself. But let's see what happens if I run this twice. Not good. Exception. I get a duplicate key exception because I'm trying to insert the same document twice. That's not what I want. What I really want to do is, if that tweet doesn't already exist in the collection of tweets, I want to insert it. Otherwise, I want to essentially ignore it, just leave it alone. So we've already learned how to do this last week with an upsert. So I'm going to change the insert to an upsert using the update method. The criteria will just be the ID, which I can say just by new basic DB object and then car.get ID. And the document will just be car, and then I want to say true to make it an upsert, and then false for multi. And now when I run this, I get a tweet count of 20 because all those documents were there already. So let's just start again. I'll drop everything. Tweet count is 0 now. I'll run it once. I get a tweet count of 20. I run it again. Get a tweet count of 20. That's because I'm doing upserts. The first time I ran it, inserted all the documents. The next time it didn't do anything, essentially. So let's go back once more. And there's one other thing I want to do. I notice here that this user has a lot of information here that I don't really care, and it's going to be duplicated for every tweet. So what I want to do is just keep a little bit of data about the user, but throw everything else away. So I want to keep the ID of the user, the name, and the screen name. And one other thing I don't like about this is the created@at field is a string representing a date as opposed to a date, which will make it harder to do data arithmetic if I want to ever do querying on the created@at date. So I'm going to massage the document a little bit before I put it in here. And I already wrote this method, which I'll show you. It's massage tweet. Let's take a look. I do two things. I create a simple date format that matches that pattern. And then I get the created@at as a string and then pass it to parse of simple date format and re-put it back as the value of created@at. So I'm taking the string value of created@at and turning it into a date and reinserting it back into the document. And then for my user subdocument, the way I get rid of all the extra fields, I do a car.get user, cast that to a DB object, and then I iterate over the key set, so all the keys in user. And if the key doesn't equal ID, name, or screen name, I remove it by calling keyIterator.remove. So let's run this again. My tweet count is still 20, but since I did an upsert with replace, the documents should now look the way I want them to. So my created@at field is now an ISO date instead of a string. And my user document just has the three fields, ID, name, and screen name. And now I have my data and I can do searches on it. So I can do, let's see. So say I want to find all documents where the retweet count is greater than 5 and count them. I can do that with a simple query. Let's say I want to find all tweets where the text of the document contains the word China. And I can do that with a regular expression. MongoDB is coming to China. And finally, the last thing I wanted to show you is I can add tweets for a different screen name. So if I change this to 10gen instead of MongoDB, I'll get the last 20 10gen tweets as well. So now my tweet count is 40, and let's search for tweets containing MongoDB. And you can see them here. Let's just look at the screen name instead. And you can see there's a lot more tweets containing MongoDB for the screen name MongoDB than for 10gen. Okay, that's it. And there's no quiz.